Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and as you know, we are doing 24 videos in 24 hours, and some of those are going to be live, some of them like this are pre-recorded and are going to be premiered. I don't know if I'm going to be able to hit everybody up in the chat. I'd like to get a little bit of sleep. As you know, on the 10th, the terms of service changes big time, big time. So we're starting Sunday at midnight, and we're going all the way to when the terms of service changes, where, hey, guess what? If you're not commercially viable, which I don't know that the Ripple Effect podcast is, by Ricky Varendas, by the way, who was our guest, well, guess what? It looks like we have no obligation to host your video. We might just delete your channel. So, a lot of people are talking about alternatives and what platform to go to next. But quite frankly, Ricky, I want to be on this platform because it is the largest one. I do not preach hate speech. I do not call for violence. I do not personally attack people. And I know that's not what you do either. Instead, we try to bring a balanced and honest opinion to real world events from every angle. So, Ricky Varendas of the Ripple Effect podcast, tell us how you got started and why this is an important issue.
Well, I got started actually like probably a lot of podcasters. I got addicted to podcasts. Joe Rogan was the first one that I fell in love with. I loved the casual conversation. I loved it. It seemed like the only place where I could get a true discussion, a place where people were truly sharing ideas and having a honest discussion about topics that I was interested in. And it was a casual platform that I really liked. I mean, you listen to radio, you read newspapers, you're online, you're watching the news. It seemed like everybody was trying to sell you something or had an agenda or it was scripted. And then Joe Rogan's podcast, because it was so casual and you never knew where the conversation would lead, it attracted me to it. And at the time, and I still do a lot of commuting for work, but at the time I was doing a lot of commuting for work. I live closer to Springfield, Massachusetts, but I was working a lot in the Berkshires. So I was driving an hour and a half, 2 hours to work, and it was time to kill. I could make a couple phone calls. I could listen to, I mean, I love music. I grew up as a musician. You can see I still have some instruments behind me. But there was something about like just how stimulating these conversations were and hearing just different perspectives I've never heard of. And I barely graduated high school. After high school, I felt like, I was just going it with the motions, and I wasn't really getting into anything that was really that interesting. And, I got really obsessed with documentaries and then podcasts, and it just kind of opened up the door to really interesting stuff. So eventually I'm like, you know what, I can contribute something. I was having similar type of discussions with my friends and we would have these discussions. I'm a big bourbon drinker and wine drinker, and then I love cigars. And it was really when I first got into those things, because I'm not a cigar snob or wine snob. It was more about I still kept in perspective that the reason I enjoyed those things wasn't so much. I mean, I did enjoy, I guess, giving attention to your senses. But what I really enjoyed was the fact that it brought people together. It forced people to put their phones away and have conversations and talk. Like, we get around where we're talking about what we're smoking or what we're drinking, and then other discussions come up. And the guy I started my podcast with, who's one of my best friends, Dave, which was actually my co-host, I believe, when Jason was on my podcast, probably like 6 years ago. You were one of my first guests. He doesn't smoke cigars, but he would always hang out. And I always told him how I'm like, when you're around, I'm like, even if you're just hanging out, I'm like, there's something about this idea of sitting around and forcing each other to like share lighters or talk about what we're drinking. That kind of, it ends up sparking really deep. It seemed like it sparked deeper conversations. And him being from the outside looking in, he's like, dude, you're right. Every time you guys are around, sharing whiskey or cigars, he's like, it seems like we get into something much deeper than you would if you're just kind of bullshitting about sports or whatnot. And so I thought like, hey, you know what? I'm working full-time job. What am I contributing? I felt unfulfilled. I wasn't doing music anymore because when you get older, it just got harder to keep the band together, and people had their own personal things going on. So, and then I'm like, that's why I call it the Ripple Effect podcast. I had a song called The Ripple Effect. And I truly believed in the idea that we could all do something, and you never know what type of impact it could turn into or how something small could expand to something greater. You don't know who's listening. You don't know, and I always told myself, I'm like, people like Martin Luther King or whoever, you think is a great historic figure. They were influenced by lesser known people that probably didn't think that they were going to influence somebody who was, obviously became a historic figure. So it's like, we're all doing that. There's people who are listening to your show, listening to my show, walking around with headphones on, and you never know who they're going to be or what type of impact they're going to have. And everything they run into, every show they listen to, every conversation, discussion that they're taking in, it's helping mold their perspective. The same way that podcasts that I love. I mean, your work. Obviously, you were one of my first guests on the show. Your documentaries, your work, James Corbett. Some of the Daniele Bignelli, Douglas Ruskoff. These were some of the first guests on my show, and I was a fan of all these people, and Joe Rogan's podcast. And that's why I had so many people on that has been on his show too, like Eddie Bravo and stuff like that. And they influenced me. And so you never know what type of impact you have. So the ripple effect became more than just a name of a show. It really was a philosophy that it itself became a example of that philosophy, because I started it in the same basement, and 6 years ago, with guests like yourself that I was just super happy were willing to come on when I only had 15 episodes or 20 episodes, whatever it may be. And eventually I did end up having people like Jesse Ventura and Freeway Rick Ross and Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson and Matt Farah and all these people who are, and a singer of a Fear Factory, Burton C. Bell, which I grew up loving, and the singer 1 Minute Silence. So it's just like all these people, Cell Dweller, like all these people that it's just mind blowing. And it became an example. Like I started off the show, I created the show saying that we can all do something. You never know what it's going to turn into. And the show became an example of it, because I was just nobody who just had a full-time job, who wanted to do something. And even if I only reached a handful of people, it was more about just feeling fulfilled and really just, I guess in a way it was selfish in regards to I just wanted to feel like I was doing something. And then once I had kids, I only expanded on that feeling, because now it's now I want to lead the world a little better than I received it for their sake, and I think we all, we all should, whatever you enjoy, whatever hobby it is that brings you some type of happiness, if it's painting, if it's, drawing, if it's music, even if, whatever you consider success, even if it's not, you're not doing it for the purpose of being successful, or doing it as a career, I think it brings you some personal fulfillment and happiness that I think people miss out on, because I think most of us do what I did for a couple of years, where I was stuck in these motions of going to work, coming home, you take care of your chores, you drink on weekends and hang out with your friends, but you felt like something was missing. You felt like you could do more. And so, that's how it started. I kind of just, that was my motivation to do something. And even if it didn't turn into anything, at least I know I attempted it. And, when you meet old people, retired people, and you kind of talk to them and you take in some of their wisdom, I mean, you constantly hear the same stories of, I wish I pursued that longer. I wish I attempted it. You never hear them say, I wish I gave up sooner. That doesn't happen, so.
Well, let's talk about that, because I think especially the tail end, when you talk about people being unfulfilled and doing something. All right. Not everybody, Ricky, has the gift of gab like yourself, is going to be able to do a podcast, has the broadcasting experience of myself, is going to be able to do a show like this or Photoshop. But like you just said, people have different skill sets. And what I think is important is having those deep conversations that you talked about in the beginning with the bourbon and, the cigars. Just because you're unwinding doesn't mean you have to talk about gibberish, nonsense, celebritard infotainment. Sometimes that is the best time to relate to people and, feel how, we all have these things in common, right? We all want a better life for our loved ones. You talked about your kids and how you want a better world and a better understanding for them. And I think that's what essentially is important. And what people don't understand about that is that when you do those things on behalf of others, all of a sudden you feel better. It's almost addictive. Any kind of money you've spent or material item you have or experience is not as good as the long-lasting feeling of having an impact on somebody's life, having that ripple effect. And, I have a relatively small audience here. We're under 40,000 subscribers right now. We're trying to boost that up to 40 to 50 to 100 and so on. But this platform, which this channel actually started in 2007, and the reason it started was I needed a venue to put out the Barry Jennings interview prior to it coming out in Fabled Enemies, because it never really came out in Loose Change Final Cut. We had all these legal issues and Barry himself, but after I put that out, and it was dormant for a while, and, just in February, I resurrected it. I didn't go full-time on it until June. In February, I think I had under 5,000 subscribers, and here we are. So you can have an impact if you are willing to put the work in. And this is my passion. I love doing this. That's why we're doing 24 videos in 24 hours. But in a lot of ways, I feel like it's almost our civic duty to do this on top of it when we have a nation that still largely does not understand that in April of 2018, there was no gas attack in Duma. When we have Anderson Cooper making Tulsi Gabbard say, well, he's a dictator, right? Referring to Assad and, he gasses his own people. Folks, I want you to read this. This is why the mainstream media is dead. This is on the 7th. Yesterday, I resigned from Newsweek. Now, you watch this video, and more than likely, it's going to skip to a Fox News video or a CNN video or maybe a Newsweek video or a Washington Post video, because they're authoritative sources, by the way. After my attempts to publish newsworthy revelations about the leaked OPCW letter were refused for no valid reason. And for those people that don't know what that letter is, we've covered it here. And it is the letter from the people that actually carried out the investigation on top of the leaked report that shows there was no attack in Duma, that they staged the cylinders, and they were very displeased with what's been put out in the public. Silence in the mainstream media in the United States. Tucker Carlson is the only one that's covered it, and then it was in passing in a Jeffrey Epstein article by T.A. Frank in Vanity Fair. So kudos to him for that. I've given him credit. But because of that, I have literally been saying the same thing because Pearson Sharp was on the ground. Robert Fisk was on the ground in the days after. Within a week, I knew it didn't happen. When Tulsi Gabbard asked James Mattis in front of Congress whether they had any evidence that an attack even happened, he said no, that an attack even happened. So this is an important venue, and I'm not preaching hate. And I really hope that YouTube thinks twice about getting rid of my channel, your channel, or any channel that they deem commercially non-viable, when the only ones that are commercially viable are the ones that push the war machine or don't talk about it at all, Ricky.
Now, the YouTube thing, are the new rules and regulations going to be just for people who are actually using YouTube for income? Because, obviously this has been a hot topic for a while in the alternate media, and I've never put ads or any commercials on my YouTube channel. So I'm curious, do you know if like
everyone.
a channel,
it's everybody. You don't have to have it monetized. Corbett's in as much of a chance as I am to go away. And Corbett's never monetized a video. I wish I could get James on this 24 hours, but I thought about it so late, I doubt I could book him, I literally came up with this idea 2 days ago, and I'm like, that is a good idea. I should do it because who knows? Let's go out with a bang. And a lot of people want to talk about alternative platforms and where are you going to go, Jason. I just like everybody to know that pretty much everything I've done on the channel, especially the live stuff, gets put on Periscope too. I simulcast just in case. I want this information to live on. Where can people find your podcast? Because you put it out in a plethora of places, right?
Yeah, well, you can go to rippleeffectpodcast.com. That'll take you right to the website where you can download the audio. It's on YouTube also. Anytime there's a video episode, you can go there, and you can just see if a guest is calling in using video, you can actually visually see us talk. The YouTube channel is RV Theory 6, which is also my Twitter handle. It's my Instagram name if you want to just see what I'm eating or what I'm drinking or pictures of my kids. You can go on there. And then Facebook, we also have a page, the Ripple Effect podcast. You can look that up. And so it's a bunch of places. I mean, I definitely think that YouTube, I'm a little concerned about it being there. Most people listen to podcasts. They don't watch them because of the long form conversation, but it is nice. I mean, at least for a while when I started, I assumed the more places I had it, the better. And that if somebody's looking up 9/11 or whatever, maybe you'll get a suggestion to interview, with you on my show about 9/11 and loose change or whatnot, or some other guests, and people might run into it because that's what the internet was for a while. I mean, you could Google some topic that you liked, and you could go down these rabbit holes and find great work and researchers. And now they're force feeding you the mainstream narrative, and that's why I think podcasts now. I mean, the reason, like I mentioned, the reason why I love podcasts was because I did feel like TV, radio, newspapers. A lot of websites, they had agendas, and you weren't really hearing true discussions. You weren't hearing people not just share ideas, but challenge ideas. And podcast was a place for that. And now it seems like more than ever, 6 years later, that's going to be the case, and it's going to be even more true. I think what's going to happen is that you can't go to YouTube, you can't even Google stuff. You have to find a podcast you appreciate and that you respect, and with people that have the resume. You've heard them. I mean, the thing about these podcasts, you've heard hours and hours and hours of me talking to everybody from, people like Scott Horton, who's, a liberal, to, I've had Roger Stone on years ago. I mean, I'll listen to, I've had Jack Abramoff on. I'll listen to anybody, and I'll have actual discussion with them. And if I disagree with them, I'll respectfully, tell them, and we'll have a discussion. And but if they have something that's worth talking about, and I don't have to agree with everything that they're doing. James Perloff, I mean, he's obviously very Christian. I'm kind of I don't know what I am. I'm agnostic, I guess. And that's okay, because we agree on a bunch of other stuff. We can talk about that stuff. So I think it's very important. I've hosted debates with Adam Kokesh and Hunter Motz, on their perspectives. And stuff like that. So, and I've had the JFK assassination special where I had a bunch of researchers who didn't necessarily agree on stuff, hoping that it was more about a exercise to show that getting in a room, or in this case, online, a virtual room, with people that you don't agree with on every single point isn't a bad thing. And it doesn't always have to lead to a negative outcome where you're mad and you're frustrated or whatnot. But if people are coming together for the purpose of just sharing ideas and being open to having their ideas challenged and being open to having their minds changed, then talking to people you agree with, you don't learn anything. I love talking to people I disagree with, because most of the time I'm still analyzing why I believe something, or why I have this perspective or opinion, and I want to hear somebody else's perspective and opinion, so I can kind of, reanalyze mine and be like, okay, no, that actually makes more sense than where I stand. So I think it's so important to have these type of discussion. That's why I attempt to have so many podcasts where I have a group of people together. You've been on a few, and I've done a bunch of them with Sam Tripoli and James Corbett, and it's good because I think, we all bring something to the table. Everybody can, if everybody's civil enough where if you disagree with somebody, you're comfortable enough where you can bring it up and you can talk about it, and nobody's going to be mean to you or put you down. And that's why I've had some issues with people in the alternative media in the past, because I think people turn on each other. It's like, if you don't agree on everything, then, all of a sudden you become an enemy. It's like, wait, I think if we're all trying to expose corruption and we're all fighting for the same purpose, then why are we turning on each other? Like, we're not the enemy. Like, I can be wrong on something, and I'll openly admit if I'm wrong on something, and I could be wrong, not because I'm trying to sell you, I'm some shill and I'm trying to sell you some wrong narrative. I could be wrong just because I'm wrong, because
you're a human being, Ricky.
Yeah, I'm a human being.
Mistakes.
I read something that made sense, and then I'm like, okay, yeah, I agree with this. This makes sense, and then come to find out, like, okay, maybe that research was wrong, or that article quoted somebody incorrectly. So I think that if people, that's the thing. Like, we all should be on the same team, and we should all be helping support each other. That's one thing I loved about the podcast community, is how quickly, Dan Carlin, Danielle Vignelli, yourself, like, so many people were willing to come on and help, promote my show, because my show's smaller. James Corbett, who's been on a bunch, and we're all willing to help each other because of that, that reason. And I have people starting podcasts who contact me all the time, and I give them as much help as I can. I mean, I helped So many people start podcasts by telling them how to do it, and I'm like, hit me up if you have any questions. Hit me up. I've helped other people book guests. I remember Robbie Martins from Media Roots wanted to get Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson on, and I had him on first. So I'm like, yeah, here's his contact information. This is how I got him on, and other guests like that. People, if I can help, that's what I'll do. And so I love that because we're all fighting for this, and that's why my stuff is all open source. I tell people, share it where you want, upload it where you want, because it's about getting these discussions out there, and you never know who's going to run into it. And that's why it's to end this rant, I want to end it with just, it's really important for people to do that, because I tell people in my intros all the time, I'm like, I do have a Patreon page I started not too long ago. I don't have a whole lot of support on there, but more importantly, because I know money's tight, especially with the holidays right around the corner. People have families and stuff like that. And but one thing you can do is just post these videos, post these discussions, post these podcasts, whatever you like that you think is worth listening to. Post it on your Facebook page, post it on your Twitter account, post it on your Instagram page, because there's so many times I've had friends of mine say, hey, that podcast you did was awesome, whatever. And I'm like, I shared it. I got like 3 likes. I'm like, I didn't even know. And he's like, and they're like, yeah, I saw it on Facebook. And I'm like, well, why didn't you like it? And it's just like but it was an example. It was a reminder that a lot of people are seeing this stuff who aren't necessarily, taking the time to maybe hit like or sharing it themselves. So you never know who's running into it. So I think it goes a long way. And it's obviously, with big tech having a control of what's being shown to people and not, we need to help each other by doing these little things of sharing it and whatnot, because they're not going to, they are going to suppress videos. I mean, you talk about controversial stuff. I've had people on, Del Bigtree on vaccines years ago. I've had Dr. Brzezinski was one of my, I think the first year I started the podcast, he was one of my initial guests, which his cancer cures and stuff like that. So anything that's alternative medicine, anything like that is really, it's considered controversial, but it's insane to me that these discussions can't be heard. And you know what? Listen to the podcast, listen to the discussion, and make up your own mind. I mean, people should have access to all the information, every side of the argument, and then that's what intelligence is. Intelligence is me researching, me finding a bunch of information, me hearing a bunch of different discussions, and then my ability to filter out the stuff that doesn't make much sense, the bullshit, and then take in and use the stuff that does make sense. And I think people can be good at that if they have access to all the information. If they actually have access to different topics and different perspectives, then people can do that. People can take the stuff that makes the most sense. But if you don't hear the other perspective, if you're just force-fed a narrative, then yeah, like anybody who questions vaccines does sound insane until I sit down with you and we have a long discussion about vaccine courts, people who have been injured. And then you're like, you know what? It's this argument's starting to sound more reasonable, and it's not anti or pro. I'm just using vaccines as an example, but it's just one of those hot topics that people immediately pick one side or the other. And there's not enough places where people come together and say, okay, well, where do you stand? Where does your perspective come from? Where does your opinion come from? And where does mine? And we talk about it. And we need those type of things, because if not, then we're just, it's divide and conquer. Those in power, those who are pulling the strings, will just have us fighting about all these topics. And then it's easier to control us, because instead of focusing our energy and anger towards the people who are actually, making our lives worse, we're fighting amongst each other. And most of us, I went to the gym this morning, and then I went to go play basketball. Guess what? Like, I don't know where these people stand that I'm playing pickup ball with, like where what their ideology is or what political party they like. And it doesn't matter. Most of us get along when we're just hanging out, and it's just like, it's TV, it's media that forces us to fight over these things, because it's like they force you to fit in the box. Like, you pick a team and then you have to defend that team regardless. If you're a Patriots fan, Brady has never done anything wrong. If you're not a Patriots fan, he's the worst person ever. It's like that's what we do. It's just like a sports team. You defend your team till the end of time. And it's silly, because I'm from Portugal, where you have many political parties, and their system's obviously not perfect either, but you come to America, and it's like it's mind-boggling that people can just pick one of two sides and say that I agree with this side on every topic. Like, people should be much more complex. Our ideas, our perspectives, our opinions should be much more complex than being able to fit in one of two boxes. Like, these topics, these issues, whatever issue may be, they're usually much more complex, and the truth lies somewhere in between. It's not black or white. It lies in the gray area. So I'm sure I probably made a couple points in this long rant, but yeah. So, I don't know if you want to add some of this. I'm giving you a little bit of a break, Jason. I know you're going to do a lot of talking from from here.
You're killing
forward.
it, Ricky. I agree with everything you say.
So
There's nothing
I'm
wrong.
Some time for you.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with actually talking to other people. In fact, that's encouraged. You should be able to change your mind. You shouldn't be hard-lined, hard-wired. That's where you get ideologue worship and demigods and saying, hey, we just abandoned the Kurds. We abandoned the Kurds. The Turks are going to slaughter them. We need to stay in Syria. You start repeating things that just aren't true when you don't have long-form conversations about real issues that affect all of us. Guys, the Ripple Effect podcast, you can go check it out just about everywhere. You can follow Ricky at RV Theory 6 on Twitter. You can thumb this video up and share it because that does help me. We're trying to get to 40, 50, 100,000 subscribers. We're normally doing it 3 to 7 times a day. You are part of the 24 hours in 24 videos. Hopefully, before I am no longer commercially viable and they are no longer obliged to host this channel. We're going out with a bang if we're going out. I'm a documentary filmmaker. All my films are free right here in the documentary films playlist. That's Loose Change, Final Cut, Fabled Enemies, Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined, and Shade the Motion Picture. Make sure to share those as well. If you want to financially support me, I do it one way. There is no Patreon. There is no Subscribe Star. There is no bonus content. I don't have any secret sources I'm not sharing with you. There is no course. But there are free videos every single day. So $5, $10, $15 means the world to me. Or again, just share this material. That being said, I love you guys, and I will see you soon on the flip side.